And now, Lifestyles Unlimited presents the Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Over the next hour, we unfold your map to financial freedom. You'll learn how to retire through investing in single-family and multifamily real estate. You'll learn how to create cash flow and build wealth so you can have the time and money to live the lifestyle you want.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Andy Webb with Lifestyles Unlimited. And as always, we're working on your financial freedom. Hey, I got to tell you, I have a special guest for you today. This is a fella that is very difficult to bring onto the show because he lives literally a world away, and just with the time zone differences, it makes it almost impossible to schedule with him. But he is in town now in Dallas-Fort Worth, so I'm excited, and I think by the end of the show, you're going to be excited as well. I have the pleasure today to bring Peter onto the program, and let's just jump right in. Peter, are you there?
I'm here, Andy.
All right, Peter, first and foremost, I said lives a world away. Tell us where you're from.
I'm from a place called Townsville, and it's in Queensland in Australia.
So Australia. Literally other side of the globe from where I am sitting. So, and actually I did have the pleasure to bring you on the program. It's been a couple years now. I looked up the show. It was November of 2020. We did that show when you were in Queensland, and the stars just aligned. It worked out. It was a great show, and you're in town now, which makes it a heck of a lot easier for me. I'll tell you that, and for my producer. What brings you to DFW?
Well, I was here for the Lifestyles Unlimited Expo, which has just concluded. It was held from February 15 to 18 here in Irving. So that's what brought me to town, just to mix with all the investors in the group. Okay.
And I'm curious, I'm sure the listener may be curious as well. How long of a flight is that? What's the rigmarole to get here?
Well, this time was a little bit shorter than it has been in the past. It was round about, I had a direct flight from Sydney to Dallas. It was about 15 and a half hours, and I had some hours before that. So let's call it 24 hours.
Okay, well, it's still pretty long. You know, I looked at Google. I looked up the flight, and first of all, it said, you cannot drive there. I said, okay, I'm pretty sure I cannot drive there, and it gave me about 23. I'm pretty sure when we talked back in November of 2020, and to the listener, that show is on our website. You can go to lifestylesunlimited.com to catch that. I think your flight was like 30-plus hours. Crazy long.
Yeah, it was. It was ridiculous. But that's life when you live down there, I guess. We're a long way from anywhere. And I think most Australians are very used to travelling long distances if they want to leave the country and go and travel.
Well, you did it. You're here, and I know I saw you last year at the expo last year. This year it was in Dallas. Last year it was in Houston. We first spoke in Houston a couple years before that. And what's important about the expo? Why do you make such a long trip to be here?
The main thing, I think, is just to remain connected with everybody, because obviously I'm doing everything remotely. So I rely on email and webinar and video, and I guess like we all had to during the pandemic, we had to resort to doing things through video and not actually physically seeing and talking to people. So I guess I find myself in that situation all of the time. So I find myself listening to this radio show and all bunch of things, with case studies and so forth from Lifestyles. But it's really important to connect in person, and the event just brings everyone from around the country, and me from out of the country, to Texas to all network and mingle and talk about real estate.
Yeah, and we'll get into what it is you're doing as an investor later in the show, so the listener understands why that is important for you, for me, for other investors to be at a place like the expo. Maybe let's take a step back, and you are a member of Lifestyles Unlimited, and refresh my memory. When did you join?
I joined in 2016.
Okay, 2016. And you have a fascinating story leading up to that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were up to and what you were doing before Lifestyles and how you found the organization?
Okay. Well, I guess really it all started back probably after university when I got into work. I'm a psychologist, and I started working and decided that really the money I was getting, it was good, but it wasn't quite worth the effort I put in, I found. So I really wanted to find a way to make sure that I could continue to make my money work hard for me instead of me working hard for my money. And with that, I started to look at options of investing. I also, after getting married to my wife, Jo, and we had our first child, he had a disability. He was born with a disability, which is a chromosome inversion. He has autism, and he has developmental delay as well. So that threw a bit of a spanner in the works for us, and we had to try and find, I guess, ways to make sure that we could look after him as well. So with that, we started to look at investing, and my interest was really in real estate. So with that, I started looking around in Australia, and around my local area at the time, things were very expensive and the yields basically were very low. So in lifestyles, of course, we look predominantly for cash flow, and I wasn't seeing much cash flow. So what I did was I found a buyer's agent who turned out to be a wonderful mentor for me, and he was in another state at the time, but I was able to work with him and start buying properties around the country. And that worked incredibly well with him, at least until 2008. And of course, in 2008, we were hit with the GFC, and that then changed everything.
The whole notion of currency comes into play in our conversation, and just with the way the Australian dollar and the U.S. dollar, I guess, rebalanced or whatever you'd say there, it made it more favorable to invest in the U.S. Is that where you were headed?
Yeah, that's right, Andy. So, yes. So what happened then was that there were buyers agents here in the US who were assisting Australians, and I found one that was Kansas City based, and they were doing turnkey properties basically. And so I got involved with that. Now the beauty of it was they allowed me to learn, I guess, the processes and sort of held my hand through it. So the buying process. So whilst that worked well, some of these investments were very lower end type investments. They were quite cheap. I guess sort of class C, maybe even D areas at times, and some of them worked quite well and some of them didn't, and on some of them I certainly lost some money. So I was a little bit concerned about that, but I kept ploughing ahead basically. And I had a lot of success too in Australia in lower socioeconomic areas too, so I assumed it would be the same here, but not necessarily the case, or perhaps I bought incorrectly or a bit naively. The other thing was, as a foreigner, the ability to get finance was somewhat limited as well. And keep in mind too, we were coming out of the GFC, so financing was tight anyway. But in most cases, I could get a 50% loan-to-value ratio at best, with a higher interest rate than what was standard at the time.
Hold on, so 50% loan-to-value, where I'm normally at 75%, less money into the investment, and then higher interest rate just because, hey, you're halfway across the globe, higher risk, right?
Yeah, well, unknown, I guess. So with that, yes, it was quite difficult.
You've done the turnkey thing. Some worked out, some didn't. And turnkey, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, Peter, and most that have done the turnkey and then come to lifestyles, and we're just talking houses here, and we're going to talk something else in a little bit, but most that have done the turnkey thing and then understand the lifestyles model of buying at a discount and renovating a property and really capturing equity through the process, they find that works a whole lot better, because in your process there was no equity, right?
No, basically not. Well, there was, but it was going to the person that was selling it, right? So yeah, I wasn't getting it, and that's the difference with lifestyles and the way it's done. But all that said, I guess you need someone to hold your hand when you're going into territory that's new and unknown. And to me, to be able to trust someone at that point was very helpful. And very comforting.
Surely. And now turnkey houses, trying all this stuff. How did you come upon Lifestyles?
Well, basically from there, I started to look at other options in the US. I found another company that was based out of San Antonio, and I made the trip over and did their course, and that was mainly owner-financed related single-family housing. They weren't using any borrowing or leveraging or actually owning the house. So I was interested in that, but I was kind of concerned that I wasn't getting really the gain on the capital gain on the properties, and it all sounded a little bit limited. So at least it got me to Texas, and I got a real taste for it, I guess. And when I was here, I learned very much about how Texas attracted people with its business-friendly attitude, and migration was just happening big time, right through the state, really, particularly in the sort of San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, and Houston area. I started doing Google searches, and that was when I stumbled across Lifestyles, and then I began to look even more about what was available with the company.
Very good. Now, were you able to meet with somebody at Lifestyles while you were here, or did this take place after you returned back to Australia?
It took place after I was back in Australia, so I had to start looking at things online. And I mean, Lifestyles are set up incredibly online now. In 2016, it was sort of in its infancy online, but you still had some really good things on there, and including some introductory programs like the 90-minute free workshop was there. There were other little videos, I guess, and I realised that I really resonated with the philosophy that was coming out of it. Then I did the 2-day, and the 2-day actually was online. It was a recording of Dell doing his thing over the 2 days. And I actually found it really good because I could watch it at my own pace.
You mentioned the free workshop. We do that online now. That is fully virtual. You can go to lifestylesunlimited.com and click on the registration button there. That's just to get an introduction. And if you like what you see, if you like what you hear, like Peter said, if the philosophy, and there is a philosophy there, if that resonates with you as well, then you sign up as a Financial Freedom Program member, and that gives you access to that 2-day. And what that is, well, it's 2 days. It's Saturday and Sunday. First day is devoted to investing in single family. And here's where I think the rubber hits the road for you, Peter. Second day talks about investing in apartments. So great way to build that education. That's interesting. I didn't realize that's how they were doing that in 2016. Now it's online and it's live online. So it's a little bit different. So you listened to Dell, and what about the message resonated when you sat through that 2-day?
Well, on the single-family side, the big thing, I guess, was the hard money option, because I had not heard that anywhere in my investing in the US, and it's not something that we have in Australia either. So that makes a massive difference, and it sets the property up to cash flow every single time, basically. Otherwise, you're using a lot of your own funds, having to put a lot of your own funds into the deal. So that really stood out. And also just the general philosophy of cash flow, because where I'm from, it's very much all about capital gain and less about cash flow. Not dissimilar, really, to California in that sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what comes to mind when you make that statement, is what we see on the coast. So we're going to head into a quick break. When we get back, I want to move into what you've been doing as an investor at Lifestyles Unlimited.
Got questions? Call Lifestyles Unlimited at 855-497-4335. The Real Estate Investor Radio Show continues next.
What is Dell Walmsley, CEO and founder of Lifestyles Unlimited, up to in today's market?
I'm out there right now looking and buying everything I can get my hands on for a better deal than what I could get it for a week before. And I'll just keep buying. I did that back in 2008. I bought a property that was worth $35,000 a door. I bought it for $26,000 a door. Next month or so, I bought the same age property, and I bought it for like $19,000 a door. But by buying at 26 when they were getting killed from 35 down to 26, buying at 26 let the broker know I was a buyer in a downward spiraling market. And so from that point on, I bought 3 or 4 more. I can't remember exactly. I think it was 4 more I bought from there. And the brokers were just bringing them to me, go, look, you seem to be the only guy buying right now.
Are you ready to take advantage of the wave of opportunity coming to those who know what they're doing? Join us for the free online workshop at lifestylesunlimitedworkshop.com.
Creating the lifestyle you've always wanted. You're hearing Lifestyles Unlimited's Real Estate Investor Radio Show.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Andy Webb. If you have any questions for me, you can email me to askandy@luinc.com. And I'm joined today by Peter, and Peter's in Dallas-Fort Worth. Makes it a little bit easier to do the show, but normally he resides all the way around the world in Australia. Queensland, Australia is the state. And Peter, you really epitomize one of the philosophies we have here at Lifestyles Unlimited, which is live where you want, invest where it makes sense. And that's what we were talking about right at the end of the last segment. You said that in Australia, people aren't typically buying for cash flow. They're buying for, they're speculating, right? They're buying and hoping that that property gains in value, which it may do, or it may not. We don't know. But it sounds like you were looking for cash flow. Is that right?
Well, preferably both. But yeah, my philosophy, just like in lifestyles, is that it does need the cash flow. I mean, ultimately, it's about having cash flow in retirement. So that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, and that's what you said at the start of the program, or the start of the show today, is that, you earned well, but you could see, looking down the road, that it wasn't going to be enough. And it's helpful, to have that extra income. You mentioned you have a child with a disability, and clearly that's going to be something for the future as well that you want to build towards. So you sat down, you did the 2-day pre-recorded, and again, to the listener, this is a live thing now. So if you do the 2-day or the 4-day, we do it over 4 evenings as well. If you do this online, it is actually live, so you can interact, you can ask questions while the presenter does the teaching. Now you did the 2-day. And you heard about hard money. You'd been doing houses, single-family houses, working kind of, sort of, right, so far. With your prior company you were working with, did you go forward with houses, or did you shift directions after the 2-day?
Well, I shifted directions. Whilst the hard money was a great option, I still sensed that as a foreigner I was still going to have some difficulty getting long-term financing, or at least long-term financing with a decent interest rate, which would affect the cash flow. So my sense then was basically that multifamily investing was the way to go for me. It offered a number of benefits, and I guess the first one was that I didn't have to get the finance. There was a lead investor who was able to get that. And the second thing was that the value of the property is determined by the net operating income. So basically that means that we have the ability to increase the price of the property just through operations alone. So that meant that we could manufacture, I guess, the growth. Whereas in single families, basically, if you've got a 3-bedroom house, then chances are it's worth the same as the house next door. So we could really drive the value of the property. So I saw some major advantages in there, and I guess when I've had some mixed results in the past, all of a sudden I saw a path forward.
Yeah, very good. And what do you do with that gain? Let's say when the apartment sells, you take it and you roll it into the next 2 apartments or 3 or however many you can get into, right, and continue to grow.
That's right. So whilst the focus is really on the cash flow, you have to get those gains and then reinvest them into another deal in order to get more cash flow. So therefore you end up chunking all different types of cash flow over time. And when that replaces your income, that's retirement.
If you're listening right now, and I have to go back to live where you want, invest where it makes sense. I don't care where you're listening. if you want to take some action like Peter has, and you're thinking, I'm in Maryland, I can't do it, invest in Texas, this guy's in Australia. So dispel that notion that I can't do it, because you've heard already what Peter has done. And again, Peter, I think it's fascinating how you went about this, gradually progressing until you found lifestyles and moving away from houses to apartments. And you're exactly right. Houses are great, but the valuation of apartments, the way we can really magnify that value through what we do as good operators is phenomenal. So good story so far, but we're going to hear more. So you've been doing apartments since you became a member in 2016. And have you had, I trust you've had one go full cycle by now, right? Full cycle meaning purchased, renovated, whatever, and sold.
Yes, I have. It was actually the first one I was involved in, and it sold in around about 18 months or so.
Wow.
And then I've moved on and accelerated a little bit in 2020, and I'm up to 12 deals now. So 11 of those are still current.
Okay.
I do have one that's selling at present, but 11 deals currently.
And one of our what we call super passes that are in, I don't know, however many hundreds of passive investments. Hundreds is, of course, tongue-in-cheek, but quite a lot. His statement is never eat your seed corn. So do you hold to that?
It's very true. Basically, those funds are your seed corn, and you need to reinvest those, and that's very much what I do. So that money stays here and goes into the next deal, whether it's a sale or a refinance. I guess it is starting to spread internationally.
Yeah, very good. I mean, Lifestyles Unlimited International. I love it. That's
yeah.
You know, I lived for quite a while in Germany, Peter, and I wish I had found the organization then. You were talking earlier about exchange rates, and at the time I was paid in euros, and €1 bought $1.60. When I think back, you know, I think the biggest regret of most real estate investors is that they didn't start sooner. Had I found the organization from abroad like you did, I could have done so much. Now we've done very well, don't get me wrong, but just thinking about the currency and all that fun stuff, and actually thinking about currency, are there any particular challenges that someone that is international and listening right now that they would need to think about when investing from afar, from abroad?
Well, yeah, exchange rate fluctuates quite dramatically sometimes, and the minute there is a drama in the stock market, or I guess an issue economically, any sort of fear in the market, what I find is the Australian dollar drops relative to the American dollar. So if I was to send money to the US for an investment, the power of that money dilutes a little. On the other hand, if it's coming the other way, if money was coming from the United States to Australia, it would be a real gain. I mean, most of my funds, really all of them, stay in the United States anyway and continue to work for me here. But it also, these days, funds the trip to come to Expo. So that is a wonderful thing, because I just love coming here whenever I can, basically. So it's wonderful to have that funded by the cash flow from the properties itself.
Yeah, I can only imagine how pricey a flight from Australia all the way over here would be. I'm curious as well, thinking about, because we're in tax time here in the U.S., right? I just got my first K-1, in fact, the other day, a few weeks earlier than they're due. When it comes to filing taxes in Australia, is that? I'm picturing that it's very complicated. Maybe it's not. What is your CPA or whoever? What do they do when you present them with your 12 K-1s?
Yeah, it's a bit daunting. Well, the tax return's interesting in that I do one here in the United States as well. That then is transferred to the Australian one, because that's where I reside, right? So they're often quite confused by the K1 because it's not something that they would see very often. They're still quite knowledgeable. The firm that I'm with I was actually involved with them initially when I started doing the US investing. So they certainly knew more about it than most other tax offices in Australia. So that was beneficial. Sometimes I need to tell them exactly what's going on or explain, fine-tuning the details of it, just from my knowledge of investing here. But yeah, it's getting a little bit confusing in the sense that eventually you get so many K1s that have to be looked at. But really, once you've done a couple of those, it's relatively simple to work out what is going on. So it's this part, I guess, of helping them through the processes of it.
Yeah, okay. It's teaching them, essentially. And I'm curious, you're an international investor. We talked about keeping the funds in the U.S. To simplify, avoid the issue of exchange rate back and forth. Is there, for the international person out there listening, is there anything else they should consider? Do you invest in have you created an LLC, or do you just invest as Peter, for example, or are there other considerations we might think about?
No, well, I was advised to set up an LLC. The main reason for that is that under my own name, or we would normally do it myself and my wife Jo's name, but basically I was advised to set up an American entity as an LLC, and with that it gets around all of those international issues. And I found Leeds have been absolutely fantastic about allowing me to use that instead of our own names in deals. So there's a few complications with that for international investors as well, because you have to obviously set that up, but Lifestyles have attorneys that can certainly help in setting that up. The other issue is the bank account for the LLC, and that can only be done when you're here in the United States as well. And you have to have all your documentation around the company structure and everything. So that takes a little bit of thought, organisation and planning. Once it's set up, though, it's good to go for each deal they're on, and it's really just a matter of doing it again. And the same entity can be used over and over. So It works quite well once it's set up. There's a few extra steps, though, obviously, when you're international.
Yeah, but I think it's worth those couple of hurdles, and there are challenges, yes, but nothing that should cause somebody that's listening from abroad right now to throw in the towel, right? I think the rewards far exceed the effort. No
question, Andy. And I mean, what I was just hoping when I started this whole process was that I could find a way to be able to be involved and treated like any other American, and I've been able to do that, and I'm very, very grateful that that can happen legally, one, and two, just the culture and the very welcoming nature of everyone in the group. It's just been it's been lovely.
Yeah. It is a very giving organization, and you mentioned actually early on the Lifestyles Unlimited philosophy resonated with you. What in particular comes to mind when you sat through that initial free workshop that resonated back then?
Well, usually with the business, people keep their cards quite close to their chest, but the philosophy, I think, of everyone helping each other. So it's a real abundance mentality. So I've had the philosophy is I've had success here, but I'm going to be humble about it, but I want to be able to show you how it's done if you'd like to know. And there's always someone who will help you with something. So there's someone there to hold your hand through it. So it doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that whenever you've got an issue or a problem, there's someone to help you with the next step. And it's growing, and the culture grows, and it's quite infectious.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing to me, Peter, how quickly, how national in scope we are now. When you joined in 2016, Texas was the big footprint, but going back to Expo, I can't tell you how many people I met from Indiana and Washington and California and Florida, and the list goes on. And going back to Expo, you mentioned the giving nature. Did you do the bus tour while you're here?
Yeah, it was great.
And the bus tour, what is that? You're just cruising around on a bus? What do you do?
Well, you go out and see properties that have been turned around by lead investors. So I did the 2-day tour, so saw 3 properties on the first day and 3 properties on the second. So basically, the lead shows off the property really. In the best case, they've got an touch unit that needs renovation, so you can see what it's like often when a tenant moves out and it needs to turn. And then you often, if availability is there, you'll see a new unit where it's all been renovated and nicely done. So just to see what they've done, how they run their business. Sometimes they'll even hand out the numbers, which is incredible. Just to see it, smell it, experience it, it's just really, really good. And just to, I guess, to have other people on the bus too that are learning different levels, I guess, of knowledge and so forth. Some people are just starting up, but it all sort of helps, I guess, with the culture. So it's just nice to see new people coming for the first time and realising that, you know what, the support's all here. This was kind of scary when I arrived, but I see the support's there.
Yeah, they're like you said, they're not holding their cards close to their chest. They're sharing, and you're just giving back and further expanding your network, and like you said, helping them as well. All great stuff. And Peter, I'm glad you could make it over here for the expo. Hope to see you next year. I haven't yet heard where it's going to be, so we'll stay tuned, and once we know, I will certainly share that with the audience. Thank you so much for coming on with me. And when you make your flight home, I hope you have a good trip back to Australia.
The information and opinions you hear on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. The Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a professional regarding your personal investment needs. Nothing presented constitutes an endorsement, recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or security.